Up across the 15, cuts left at the 20, on the room at the 30, headed to the near sideline, one man to beat, makes the move at midfield, coming to the near side at the 30, he's at the 20, he's at the 10, 5, touchdown, Kentucky!
And with that, we're in for another episode of Believe in Kentucky. My name is Vinny Hardy, flying solo today. Aaron Gershon for the Cats Paws and former UK QB Jalen Whitlow aren't able to be here this afternoon, but we have a pillar in the UK sports media community, longtime newscaster, sports director, radio host, friend of this podcast, came on once before and took time to hop on with us again. Dick Gabriel is here. Dick, how are you doing? Appreciate you hopping on, sir.
Any good to see you. I hear your voice when you come on my show, but good to see you.
Yeah, well, I got the face for radio, so I don't know. I might want to turn my camera off so we can.
And if I'm a pillar, that means I'm a stiff, right?
No, well, what about veteran? Is that better?
That works too.
Okay. I'm not trying to be a negative connotation with that.
Oh, I know that.
Well, man, we had the bye week. Unfortunately, one turned into two, as we've heard Stoops often say, and they had to sit and just stew on that Missouri game for the past couple of weeks. So what's the vibe like in your opinion? Tennessee's coming to town. What have you kind of gotten from the team from a vibe standpoint, a mindset standpoint?
Well, they're saying all the right things. They've been very positive. We didn't get to talk to them last week. Just heard from Mark Stoops, as you know. But we talked to players this week, and they sound determined, Vinny, to put that behind them, and they firmly believe that what I think Kentucky fans are hoping is that their problems are fixable, and they seem to be, because they're problems of execution. They're not being overwhelmed by the teams that have beaten them. Now, you might say that about Georgia, but it was hard to say because they made so many mistakes against Georgia. And early in that game, if they break back and score on Georgia, and they had an opportunity, I don't know that they win, but they're a lot more competitive, as they were the last couple times they played those back-to-back Georgia national champs. Kentucky played Georgia during the regular season as tough as anybody, as you know. So that didn't happen in Athens. And then, buddy, I don't know what happened against Missouri. I mean, they could have looked like they could have knocked the locker room door down on the way out to the field. That's the way they played. And then that fake punt, which, by the way, I will always say resulted, no disrespect to Mizzou, but the receiver pushed off. I mean, Andrew Phillips is in his kitchen. And the next thing you know, he's 3 yards away and falling down. And the kid made a great catch and was a great throw. But anyway, Kentucky had plenty of opportunities to come back in that game and did make it 21-20, and it just fell apart. Penalties, drop passes, it all went bad. So if they can clean that up, they can do a lot of good things this year.
Absolutely. I'm a Cowboys fan, as you know, and, of course, you can't stand them.
I forgive you for that, yes.
The heyday, Michael Irvin and the triplets. Michael was famous for separating just without getting caught. Like Greg Maddux would get that wide strike. Michael Irvin could somehow push off and get away with it most of the time. And I guess the Mizzou kid, credit the punter for making a good throw, but the Mizzou kid was right on that line. If he extends his arm another inch, maybe there's a flag. I don't know, but I'm with you.
Maybe if Andrew had fallen down,
like Manning, just flop like Manning did.
Flop. That's right.
It's like you got shot out there. They'd had to call it for sure.
Still, they should have come back and won.
Yeah. And we had Christy Thomas, who's down there field level like you. She was on with us last week, and she said the air came out of everything. Still up 14-7, but just way more of a gut punch than maybe it should have been.
Yeah, and it was that way not just in the stands, but on the sideline. I mean, those kids were dumbfounded because they were celebrating already, at least celebrating the immediate success. And I'm sure they're thinking it's fourth down. We're going to get the ball back in pretty good field position and take it down and score again because they can't stop us. And the exact opposite happened. So it was weird.
And watching the broadcast, they interviewed Drinkwitz, they do those sideline sessions, and his thing, we got to just survive this first quarter, and to their credit, they were able to weather the storm and get out of, they were, up against the ropes and cornered and ready to be knocked out, and they fought it off and made a dramatic turnaround. So
Jeff Kokoro likes to talk about Mike Tyson when we were actually getting ready for the Georgia game, and at a couple of times pregame, he said it's a lot like the people who fought Tyson or any other great heavyweight. If you can just withstand the first couple of early rounds and settle into a real fight, then you got a chance.
mm-hmm.
That looked like it might happen against Georgia. It did not. But that's what Missouri did, to your point, against Kentucky.
They sure did. Sure did. I was listening to, I said it yesterday with Aaron and Jalen, or maybe last week, I forget, but McElroy and Kubelik, Cole and Greg, they do a show together there in Birmingham, and they had former Vol Jason Swain on there asking, this was before they played Alabama, they were getting the vibe from Knoxville from him. And in particular, him being the ex-wideout, was talking about the passing game. And he says, when, we have guys open, the passes have been inaccurate. When the passes have been accurate, they've been dropped. When you have a chance for a big play, there's been a penalty. I said, you could carbon copy everything he's saying with what everybody in Kentucky's saying. I mean, the exact same thing they're fussing about is what we've been fussing about.
And both teams run the ball well. So they've had some success this year. But, yeah, that's exactly right. And to me, Vinny, that's the most puzzling part of this season for Kentucky, because people keep asking me. I was on a national show the other day. I was on a local show the other day, asking me about Devin Leary. Would you characterize him as a failure? And I said, well, it's hard to get a read on him because, as you know, passing begets passing. You complete a 10-yard pass, you get 4 more downs, right? And a chance to throw even more. If you complete a 25-yard pass, how much better do your numbers look? And if the kids don't drop these passes in the end zone, obviously your touchdown totals are a heck of a lot better. So it's hard. But on the other hand, with Devin, unfortunately, he's missed some guys. He missed, was it Berrien Brown in the Missouri game, running behind the Missouri defense. Perfect play call. And we heard later on, they said, we thought we could get that play, and we got it, and yet we don't complete it. So it's just hard to get a read on all of this. But I think the most surprising of the two things that have surprised me the most were that Dane Key and Berrien Brown have not been super accurate in their routes and not hanging onto the football as well as they should have. And Berrien's been nursing an injury, frankly, since preseason. So that's not an excuse, but that just might be why he's having a hard time. I think Dane has looked better at times of late. The other thing that surprised me, quite frankly, is punting. It's been terrible. Last 2 games, terrible. And I went back and looked at numbers last night, and up until Georgia, Kentucky was averaging in the low 40s, had a high of 48-yard average in one game, and yet it has gone so far south that it's just inexplicable. And I'm really curious to see who takes that first deep snap this coming Saturday night against Tennessee. Has Barry lost his job? The Smith kid from Danville has got a good leg, and his dad was an all-conference punter here, if that matters. So that's been a huge problem.
Yeah, I just wondered if there would be some depth chart shakeup where there could be. I mean, you can't do much at wide receiver because you only got what you got. But in other places where there's depth, I'm a little curious as well, because that bench can motivate. That's a time-honored proverb, but it's really true.
That's true.
You mentioned it, you didn't talk to the guys this week, but last week, I think we talked about it too. Leary, when he talked to the media, to me, still seemed upbeat, still seemed accountable, and he's a veteran. He's been around. Didn't seem beaten down by the way things had played out. Now, maybe when he gets in the dorm by himself or whatever, that's a different story. But I like the way he carried himself and just kind of faced the questions head on.
You said it yourself. He's a veteran quarterback, and so he's been there. I have no idea what media coverage is like in Raleigh, North Carolina. I know he had more success down there, so this is probably the first time, at least in college, that he has dealt with people who doubt him, who criticize him. Thankfully, it seems like a pretty good group of kids, of young men who play for Kentucky. So the chemistry has been good. And I've traveled, as you know, with this team, and you know, they seem like a close-knit bunch around the hotel and things like that. And to your point, he is saying all the right things, but he also knows that as a QB, he'll get too much credit and too much blame. That's what happens when you sign up to play quarterback. I asked Liam Cohen a little bit this week about play calling and whether or not he will think about calling some plays that are a little bit easier to execute early just to help Leary and his receivers gain a little confidence going into this one. You see in the NFL all the time with a backup QB. What's the first pass they call? Swing pass, right? You know, a dump off. I wonder, will they do that? And here's the thing about Kentucky. They've got a great pass catching running back in Ray Davis. I mentioned him in the same conversation, the same sentence with Anthony White, who's the best of all time at Kentucky when it comes to pass catching running backs. And he was right place, right time. He played there in the air raid, but he had the skills and he made it happen. And I think Ray Davis can do the same.
Yeah, Anthony was just so versatile, you know.
Yeah.
The perfect piece for that system at that time. You're exactly right. Do you think we'll see a change in tempo? Will they go a little faster? Will it still be what it's been? They've had to, if they're going to change it, this past couple of weeks were the time to, you know, kind of pick up the pace. How do you think that'll play out?
That's a great question. I think at times they will. I don't think they will for the entire game. I think what's vital for Kentucky this week is to run clock. Go back and look at time of possession this season. And it also comes with a big old asterisk because the defense has scored, you know, and there have been short fields thanks to turnovers. They've done a nice job. So they have had scoring drives, either none by the offense or short fields by the offense, which means they haven't needed a lot of time to score. But you know, alternately, it means the defense is on the field more often. And the best defense is less defense. The less time they're out there, you know, the better off you are. So I'd say, and we've seen them run tempo at times, depending on the package of plays. But I do believe that they're going to do their best to put together long drives the way they did when Cohen was here 2 years ago. But then again, he had a guy named Chris Rodriguez and a receiver named Wandale.
That's true. That is true. They're, of course, 2-2 in the conference, you know, 1-1 on the road, 1-1 at home. The constant in the two home games, you know, even though they lost to Missouri, the win over Florida was fast starts. Jumped on Florida very quickly. And, you know, unlike the Tyson opponents that survived the first couple of rounds, they stayed on Florida for the duration of the fight. We weren't able to do that against Missouri.
Right.
Coming off a bye, we know the history coming off of bye weeks sometimes, you know, and we know the history against Tennessee, you know, unfortunately. Hopefully there's a fast start again that can be sustained like what we've seen them do. Yeah.
I'm curious to see what happens if Kentucky wins the toss, because most coaches defer. Stoops usually does, but there have been times this year that he has not deferred, that he has wanted to jump on a team and get the offense out there and get started. And of course, the gamble there is if you go 3 and out, or even 2 series and out, now the other team's got the ball coming back and they get the ball to begin the second half. I'm thinking they would defer for that reason. A little bit easier to win that middle 8 if you get the ball coming out of the locker room at halftime. But that means the defense has to be ready for that Tennessee offense. And good starts when you defer mean obviously communicate, put pressure on the quarterback if you can, but you were talking about the 2 home games. What they also have in common, as far as the other team was concerned, is those quick tosses outside. Well, actually, Georgia was on the road, but the 2 losses, those quick shots to the sideline, let a receiver pick up 4 yards because they've been playing soft coverage. receivers pick up 3 or 4 yards, and then if they break a tackle, they get to the chains. So, I want to see if they make any changes, if they tweak anything when they play Tennessee, because Tennessee's had their number a couple times, racking up big points.
And to your point about Carson Beck, he made some throws against Auburn the previous week. Brock Bowers put his cape on and got them to win down there on the plains. But he was in rhythm immediately against Kentucky because of the quick, just boom, 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 not having any resistance. And he was, had time, a clean pocket. And next thing you know, this dude he's rolling. And
yeah.
So
I don't think Kentucky's defense touched him more than twice that night in Athens. And it was similar with Brady Cook because they went for the quicks. They've been pretty good at putting pressure on the QBs. And as you know, hurries can be more valuable than sacks because you're forcing the quarterback into making possible mistakes. And it was paying off, but if you can't get to him, and as you said, clean pocket, time to throw, makes him look great.
Absolutely. Got to switch to basketball real quick. You're fresh off a trip to Highland Park, Kentucky, and Truist Arena. The Braves fan in me wants to say Truist Park. I have to, bring that back. Truist Arena for the blue-white game with your colleague Cameron Mills. Can we say that he's, as much as he fights it, he's bona fide media member now, isn't he?
He's always ripping on me. We tease each other because I'm a liberal and he's not. But he also talks about the liberal media. And I said, yeah, and that's you, So I think he finally has admitted that he's a media person, but he will not, and he's not a journalist. That's where we draw the line. But yeah, we've become really good friends. And I hope people enjoyed our banter on Saturday night. It wasn't a traditional basketball broadcast, as you could tell. It was more of a running commentary, almost like a talk show with video. But it was fun to watch. I think it was fun to be a part of.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you guys were on the call. He's doing all these player interviews and everything. The documentaries with you that everybody has loved and watched. But yeah, it was. And my thing too, I wanted to ask you. Even it was no commercials. It was streaming continually. Even as a player, if you play every minute, if you go both ways in football, there's timeouts, there's delays in the action. You were on the air the entire time, hot mic from start to finish. So was that an adjustment for you to have to get used to that? Hey, I gotta keep this going for the entire time we're on.
Yes, it was. Yeah, I mean, I have been part of a lot of different projects, telethons, a lot of different broadcasting ventures. But Cameron had reminded me, we didn't have any commercials last year. And I said, are you sure? He goes, yeah. And so we get there and talk to the producer, and yeah, that's the case. It's just a different, but yeah, because it's streaming, not that streaming broadcasts don't have commercials, because doing the SEC Plus that I do, there's commercials there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's what was great about having Cameron, was he never runs out of energy when it comes to that kind of thing. But you make a great point, because he had done in-depth interviews with every player, with the exception of Ivisic, and he's since done one with BC. So with Ivisic, I think I had it wrong. But yeah, he could go deep on players, and I knew what to lead him into on that. Plus, we had gone to practice the day before and sat and watched for 2 hours, watching Calipari coach, listening to Calipari coach, and just seeing what they're going to be, looking for immediately. So that helped us a lot. You might have been able to tell. But Cameron he's not afraid to draw on his own experience, and that's okay. And I lead him into that at times when it matters, when it makes sense. And I think with this particular team, when we talk about chemistry with this one, the teams that Cameron played on had great chemistry, obviously. And that, it's a chicken and egg thing. Does it come from winning? Does winning come from that? Well, the answer is yes. But the chemistry on the 96 championship team, and to a degree on 97, was different than 98, because 98 was the underdog team. And this team right now is an underdog because it's not even in the top 15. So it's easy to talk about that. But the 96 team, as you know, was so loaded. That roster is, and I said this on the telecast, there'll never be another roster like that in college basketball because everybody's going to leave, after 1 year. But this team has got so much depth. The bigger question is not so much how are these kids going to handle it and play and all that. How's Calipari going to handle it in terms of minutes and rotation and things like that? Because that was the question mark that all those kids on the 96 team had, the kids who played a lot. Bless his heart, Cameron's on the bench wondering if he's ever going to get in, But the Derek Andersons and the Antoine Walkers and people like that. I think the one guy who knew what his future was Mark Pope, because he was brought there to play in the middle, be physical, and rebound. But all the other guys, they had no idea. So now the guys they have now, what's Trey Mitchell going to end up being in February? What is Adu Thiero's role going to be? When he got there, he was a guard. He's 6'8", 225 now. Looks like he'd make a great defensive end. He is swole, as you kids say. But, it's going to be really fun to watch this story unfold.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. And, considering, Kansas early in the season, big men still recuperating, Ivisic still acclimating, going to have to maybe, quote unquote, survive the first quarter of the season.
Yeah.
Because, Hunter Dickinson is probably licking his chops, based when that time approaches, because nobody really there to kind of go toe to toe with him like we would like. So you'll have to.
What did you think of him when Kentucky played Michigan last year?
He was okay. He bodied Ugo just because he could, just because he was older and stronger and made some plays. He didn't dominate, but he was solid.
See, that's exactly what my reaction was. And I actually went over there, dipped into the savings account, bought a plane ticket. But I'm watching him and I'm thinking, when is this kid going to take over? And he never really did. And Kentucky had to make some big shots down the stretch, which it did. Mm-hmm. But watching Michigan the rest of that year, I was thinking, I don't think he's got quite the help that he needs to take Michigan where they wanted to go. I think he clearly has that kind of help at Kansas. So he might not be a dominant big man, but surrounded by the kids Kansas has, he's going to look like a different player, in my opinion.
And if they do what they should, he'll have a lot of room to operate, because they can't help and dig and swipe down and try to collapse on him. And
at the other end, he'll guard the rim and force bad shots or block shots, and they'll take off running and put together 12-2 runs and things like that, which is what if you're a Kentucky fan, you hope happens when either Bradshaw or Ugo or both come back. I think Zvonimir can probably guard the rim, but he's, as you know, a face-up out on the floor player offensively.
Mm-hmm. Yes, as all the 7-footers are now. I don't know if you saw Wemby for the Spurs.
Yeah. Well, they knew that going in too, though.
Yeah. And the Holmgren kid, which is, I hope both those guys stay healthy. Just, I'm not a fan of the Spurs or the Thunder, but just to see both of those 7-3 guys go at it for the next few years would be fun.
Not a fan of the Thunder with the ex-Wildcats on there?
Well, I mean,
I know you root for them.
Yeah. I'm a Rockets fan, but you got Naz Muhammad and a lot of Kentucky flavor there, and I think they might be under the radar to be the next team of BBN, if you will, because you have multiple cats there. The Knicks with Quickly and Randall, and them being the Knicks, got a lot of attention, but the Thunder, I think, could sneak up there. Yeah. The Lakers are so polarizing, even though you got Vanderbilt and Anthony Davis, and you had Frank Vogel. I can't root for the Lakers. I mean, I just never could, even as a kid.
No.
The Lakers or Celtics, it was a great series, but I didn't like either one of them because they'd already won too many. I'm like, I want to see somebody else. But
I became a Mavericks fan because I lived in Dallas for a couple of years. So I still kind of root for them, and their play-by-play guy's a friend of mine. They're fun to watch at times. Dwayne Casey won a ring the year the Mavericks won it. Dwayne was an assistant. He was like their defensive coordinator. So he got an NBA ring with the Mavs.
That is right. I was going to ask who your team was. I knew Cardinals and Packers. I didn't know which way you leaned in the NBA. So
I really don't have an NBA team per se. Like I said, if I had to pick one, it would be the Mavs. Just like I said, I had season tickets when I was down there, and I never thought I'd like NBA basketball. I was such a staunch college basketball fan, but a guy named Denny Treese, who was the sports director, WKYT, where I worked for forever, he left KYT, took a job in Kansas City, and was actually doing the Kansas City Royals.
Wow.
But they had a pro NBA team at the time, and they're now the Sacramento Kings. But I had him on a radio show, and I said that about basketball, and he said, you will find out that if you go watch NBA in person, you'll really like it. And Van Vancy used to do the Kentucky Colonels games in Louisville, and I was a huge Colonels fan. But he told me the same thing because they are the best athletes in the world, as you well know. And here's what I tell people about the NBA. First of all, the games are too long, but they need the games to be long so they can make money on the concessions. Season's too long, same thing. TV money, concessions money. Now they have all these salaries they got to pay. But as you know, in almost every game, there are at least 2 or 3 moments where you sit back and go, oh my God, how did he do that? Just incredible athletic achievements that you might see once every couple of weeks in the college game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In college, we like execution and, long shots made and runouts, but those phenomenal athletic plays that guys make, big or small, tall or short, you see that in the pro game, and you walk out of that arena going, oh my God, how'd they do that?
And you watch Barkley on NBA TNT. He says it all the time. Ernie, he's the greatest athletes in the world. And
I'm such a Barkley fan. That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Appreciate that. He's from the same hometown as my grandfather in Leeds, Alabama. Yeah, my grandfather moved to Kentucky from Leeds as a teenager to work in the coal mines in 1932 as a 17-year-old. That's how, my dad and how we came to be in Kentucky. But
you
were watching Auburn
podcast?
I need to listen to more. I'm kind of hit and miss.
Oh, it's not to me. It's a great podcast. Him and Ernie.
Yeah, I got to listen to it.
Excellent.
But he was at Auburn. I was a kid, and Barkley was on the screen. My granddad wasn't a big sports guy. He would watch it if it was on. If it's boxing, he kind of watch it. But Barkley was at the free throw line. My granddad was a big, strong guy. He said, that boy's granddaddy owed me $5. Talking about Charles's granddad on my granddad money. Yeah.
Are you serious?
He's from Leeds. That boy's granddaddy owes me $5.
Awesome. That's a great story.
And I was, Barkley's at Auburn in the mid-'80s. So I'm 7 or 8, but I've never forgot hearing him say that. He said, that boy's granddaddy owed me $5.
That's so great.
Just stuff that you remember, man.
And I was right at it. I was in my first job when Barkley was at Auburn, and then I was in Dallas in '84 when Kentucky beat Auburn on that last second shot by Kenny Walker. Man. I'm home. I'm at my crib in Dallas watching that. I was like, and that kind of thing. So, but watching Barkley manhandle Melvin Turpin, that was really something. I'll tell you a quick story about that. Barkley would come to town. I'll tell you 2 stories. Destroy Melvin. I mean, double, 25 and 12, whatever. Within 3 games after that, Sonny Smith had to bench him to get his attention because he was so eat up with beating Kentucky. And I thought I was imagining that, and I ended up running into Sonny Smith at the SEC tournament one year. And he remembered me for some reason. I don't know why. But we sat there and talked about a whole game, waiting for the next game. And I asked him, I said, let me ask you a question about Charles destroying Kentucky. And I described just what I described to you. He said, you're exactly right. I had to bench him just to pull him back down to reality because he so loved competing against Kentucky. But one of those games where he killed Melvin here in Lexington, Joe B took a handful of us reporters into his office one day and said, "This is all off the record." And now Joe B's gone, Melvin's gone, so I'll share it with you. He queued up video of this one play where Barkley somehow got loose on a half-court play and threw down an uncontested dunk. Well, the play began with Barkley on the low block, if you're in the end zone on the right side, and Melvin kind of guarding him. Melvin gets distracted or whatever. Barkley flashes to the high post. Melvin doesn't notice, loses track of Barkley. And so by the time Melvin notices Barkley's gone, the guards are feeding the ball to Barkley. So here comes Melvin rushing up to the high post. Well, by now, Barkley's got the ball, wheels to the bucket. No one's getting in his way, and throws down this vicious slam, leaving Melvin in his wake. And Joe B said, "You see what I'm dealing with?" That was not Melvin's strong suit. Melvin's strong suit was shooting and blocking shots, but his man-to-man defense against Barkley, although not many people, in fairness, could stop Charles Barkley. But I just love him as a commentator. He's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So you mentioned, 84, you were in Dallas. We've heard your buddy Tom Leach talk about how he always aspired to be the voice of the Cats. And he said, even hindsight, maybe that was a small target to aim for, but he was able to hit it. So in all the things that you've done, you was a sports director, broadcaster, sideline reporter for football for how many years now?
Started in '89, I think, as the sidelines guy. And there were, and there were other years where I was the scoreboard guy. So, that all adds up.
Did you aspire to be the sideline guy? Did it just kind of happen? How did it come to be?
It just happened because I was working at the WVLK. So that's why I was the scoreboard guy. Then I left, came back to Channel 27, but we had that partnership with VLK and Host Communications. And a guy named Rick Shaw was the sidelines guy. Well, Rick was one of the top salespeople at WVLK Radio. He got a job in Western Kentucky managing a radio station, general manager, which was a great move for him. But that opened the sidelines job, and I was, I guess, the logical candidate to replace him. And so that's how that started. And there have been a lot of comings and goings, with color analysts and Kaywood and Ralph and Tom. But I've just stayed there as a sidelines guy, which is great for me. I love that job. Vinny, I don't know if I could sit in a press box now and watch a football game, unless the windows were open and I could hear everything.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what makes it. Now, it's not a great seat. If something's in front of me, obviously it's cool. But if it's like at the other end of the field on the other sideline, I'm like, what happened? I like keeping an eye on the sideline and the stands and everything that's going on around me.
So there's certain places you hit in certain venues, or you just kind of you got to move around, I guess, stay on your toes in case there's an injury or they throw it to you, or when something's going on. So
I try to stay ahead of the ball so I can see, but there are times I'll purposely stay behind the ball. For instance, if I'm trying to see what Kentucky's doing defensively, or if I'm trying to figure out what's going on with the offensive line. But for the most part, I stay ahead of the ball, and I always keep an eye on the sidelines to see if somebody's hurt or if there's drama, things the fans can see in the stands. I don't get in there and weasel around and try to be out of place. But if people can see it from the stands, it's fair game. And that means the cameras can see it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so, they throw it to you for updates and what did you got down there, Gabe, and things like that. All the while, you got to, formulate a question for the coach at halftime. He does whoever, ESPN, SEC Network first with Kubelik, whoever. Then it's you. Right. We always see you coming up. You're ready. Is it normally this is going well, how do you keep it going? Or this isn't going good, how do you get it better? Is that what you normally keep it to? Or do you kind of think, well, let me do something different? Or
well, you can't really throw anything too different at them because, they're in a hurry.
Mm-hmm.
And, you don't want to cross them up. You don't want to surprise them too much. But because he has to do TV first, he has a chance to pull his thoughts together. So that gives me really an advantage. But what I try to do is ask myself, what's been the pivotal point in this game so far? And then if be it offense or defense, I can't ask about officiating, about calls like that, because I know what he's going to say. He's not going to answer it.
Right.
So, to your point, I only get really one question and probably a quick follow-up. But I try to figure out, why is the game unfolding the way it is? What does he have to say about that? And I try to go offense, defense, defense, offense with both my questions. And sometimes you get good stuff, sometimes you don't. I remember with Stoops, what game was it? Miami of Ohio. They came in, it was among his first years, and they tried this new offensive style that I think NC State had been running, coincidentally, but it wasn't on film. And it was, wasn't on anything that they had prepared for, but they saw Miami warming up. They saw some drills that Miami had been doing, and they recognized it. Stoops and one or two of his assistants who'd been at Florida State, and they recognized the pre-game drills, and they thought, they're going to try to run this stuff. And they got together and they took it apart. They did a great job. And Miami was no good, with all due respect. But they, so coming off the field, I said something about, Coach, you really handled that read option really well. He said, yeah, we saw that when we were at Florida State, so we knew what to do. I mean, stuff like that, you don't get it every week, but it's cool.
Yeah, nice little nuggets from time to time.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So the radio show, Big Blue Insider, on statewide, 6:30 WLAP in Lexington.
Statewide on Monday nights.
Okay.
Yeah. It's on WLAP the rest of the week.
Okay. So did you always want to be in radio? Did that just kind of happen as well? Or how did that come about?
Happened by accident.
Seriously?
Well, sort of, yeah. When I was in college, again, I stumbled into a job at the campus radio station because the announcer who did the games on campus radio, I mean, everybody's listening to K-Wood, but he quit. And they used to sit right next to me at the press table when I wrote for the school paper. And I got to talking to the GM about how I'd always wanted to try it. He said, well, call me. So I auditioned and got the job and did play-by-play of home UK football and basketball for 3 years. I was training academically to be a newspaper guy. I wanted to work for the Courier-Journal in Louisville ultimately. But I figured, it was going to take some other stops up the chain. When I got out of college, newspapers were cutting way back. They were either going out of business or cutting back on personnel. And so I thought, well, I'll see what's out there. But I was going on job interviews to be a newspaper guy. But I had heard a rumor that WVLK, which did a ton of sports at the time, but didn't have a full-time radio sports director, I'd heard a rumor they were going to create a position. So I was literally passing through Lexington, stopped, dropped off a resume, and got an interview. And they hired me on a Thursday, and I started on a Monday. And, of course, that was the UK flagship. So opportunities came from that. I developed that relationship with Host Communications, Jim Host, and it just kind of went from there. So I was right place, right time, which so many of us, that's the case, but you got to be ready. Mm-hmm. And I think I was ready.
Absolutely. So correct me if I'm wrong. I've met you in person a couple of times, and you've had me on your show. You've been on here. You always seem, pretty cool and collected. Maybe not easily starstruck by anybody. Has there been any bucket list guests that you've had over the years, or maybe more memorable guests or favorite guests, or I can't believe I just had such and such? Or
well, I've been fortunate to talk to so many people. I would love to do a show like with a Bob Costas or somebody like that. I would love to have been able to sit down with Vin Scully or somebody like that. But, I try to stay in my lane. But because of my position with the UK network, I've been able to talk with a lot of high profile people, which is great. I will tell you, in terms of hero worship, a guy, I didn't have him on the show. I was too afraid to ask him. Bob Gibson. Gibson. He played in our children's charity golf tournament about 15 years ago. He was my all-time favorite Cardinal.
Wow. Okay.
And he sat down next to me when we were all eating dinner on these picnic tables talking baseball. And I just couldn't believe he was sitting there. It made me nervous. But as a kid growing up, I idolized Pete Rose, and I've been able. I interviewed him a couple times, not on the radio, but just for my radio show. I'll tell you a guy I had in studio because I thought, what the heck? I interviewed Sugar Ray Leonard.
Wow.
He was in town. Yeah, he was in town for the boxing match involving Greg Page. Do you remember that name?
Yeah.
From Louisville, the heavyweight champion. And he was working for HBO, and they were in Rupp Arena. And so he was in town the day before, and I saw him eating by himself, eating lunch at the Hyatt restaurant next door to VLK. I went up, brazen as brass, a young guy, 1981. Blah, blah, blah. Would you mind? I said, the radio station's right there. He said, sure. So I came over and got him in the lobby, walked him over. He came on with us for 20 or 30 minutes.
Wow.
Great. Fantastic. I'll tell you another guy I talked to early on, and it's hard now to get people because so many people field so many requests. Well, back then, not everybody was doing. Well, there weren't no such thing as podcasts. Not a lot of people were doing radio shows. Chris Berman, ESPN. I'm watching ESPN one night because I'd look around and go, who would I like to talk to? I picked up the phone and called ESPN. Got the switchboard. Chris Berman, please. Hold on. Transfer me to the newsroom. And again, this is 1981. They've only been on the air for how long?
2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
So I Berman, phone. He comes on. Because I love doing those shows. Sure. I can give you about 15 minutes, whatever night it was. I got to do the overnights. So I can, before I leave for work, I said, that would be awesome.
Wow. He
comes on. Vinny, he did the whole hour. I kept saying I was on for 1 hour at that time. I kept saying, well, thank you so much. Well, I can stick around. Every time I get to a commercial, I can hang out.
Wow.
He does the whole hour. I sign off. He's still on the phone. I said, man, thank you. So I said, don't you have to go to work? They'll cover for me.
Get Bob Lee or somebody in there.
Fast forward 15 years, and by some way, I have been named a sportscaster of the year in Kentucky. So I'm in North Carolina at the awards banquet, the national thing. And sidebar, I had a kidney stone attack that morning, so I was high on pain pills. But Berman was the national winner. And I went up and I introduced myself to him. He's only 4 years older than I am. But I went up and introduced myself, and I said, you don't remember this. I said, but you did my show. And I said, and you were so kind to me. And so many people, big time, younger people. And I said, I want you to know that because of that, I've tried to be kind to younger people coming up the way you were with me. And, he's 6'6", right? I don't know if you knew that. But he's tall. Yeah. So he's leaning into me like this and nodding. And he kind of cocked his, he goes, well, thanks. Thanks a lot for telling me that. So after the dinner's over, and then, all the awards have been handed out, I'm talking to the host family that I was with. People take care of there. And here comes Berman walking across the room. And I look up and I look down. I look up and he's closer. And I look up and I goes, he's coming over to me. And he walked over and he stuck his hand out and he said, I want to thank you again for telling me that story. I said, cool. My pleasure, Yeah. So wow. I've had some fun.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And my most famous, Michael Jordan. Not on the show, but Michael Jordan was in Lexington at an event, like a little basketball workshop for kids, sponsored by Coca-Cola, one of his early sponsors. I think it was after his second year or maybe his rookie year, but he was huge. And so all the media people, we pile over to Lafayette High School and we're waiting. And they're like, Michael will talk to you all as he's walking. When he's done, he's walking from the front door to his limo. We're like, okay. And so I think I'm with KYT at the time. No, it's probably with you. Anyway, whoever I've got a microphone. And we're all doing the backwards walking thing, right? And he actually answered a question from me. And when he was done, he goes, watch out for the bumper. Because I was about to trip over a car. I think made us best friends.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So in terms of just crossing paths, that was cool. But I'm going to tell you what, I've done 2 longer interviews with Magic Johnson. He absolutely the best. So
Man,
great. So great.
man, that is great. That is great. So you're saying the 94 feet with Jay Billis was longer than the walk with MJ to the limo, I guess.
Oh yeah. Go back if I need to do that. That's a great idea. I need to go over to Lafayette. I live fairly close. I need to measure the distance from that door
Yeah.
to the curb.
To that bumper, exactly.
Yeah.
See?
Next time you have me on, I will tell you how far that was.
That'll work. That'll work. Oh, Corey Price had the series he did, Commonwealth Stadium Memories. He interviewed Hal Mummy and lots
Great,
of former players. And
great project.
yes, so I gotta ask you your favorite Commonwealth Stadium memory. It can be as a student, it can be as a fan, it can be whatever you want it to be. Just your favorite.
That's a great question. No one's ever asked me that as a student. Well, I had a lot of fun because I'm broadcasting the games, right? The first game I ever covered at Kentucky was actually as a broadcaster. I went to games, but I didn't cover many for the school paper because I was with the radio station. But my senior year, every home game, Kentucky won because that was the year they went 10-1.
Oh man!
But it was fun doing games because Kentucky was really good. 2 out of 3 years that I did the games, but they were grind them out games. Like they'd win 14-7 or 21-17 or something like that. Go back and look up the scores. You'll see what I mean. It wasn't any because the rules had changed. So I enjoyed that in general. And Derek Ramsey and I are now very good friends. I just love talking football with Ram. I love talking society with Ram. He's such a great guy and a great man. But my favorite is obviously the upset of LSU when they went on to win the title in 2007. And there have been a lot since then, a lot of fun games. But that game was so momentous. That was the best offensive team Kentucky has ever had, still has ever had. And if you remember that game, there were so many twists and turns, so many momentum changes, so many layers to the game, great plays by both teams, offense, defense, special teams. And it was a game, Vinny, that Kentucky always lost in the past. The other team would remember LSU missed a field goal that would have won it. Usually it's Kentucky missing the field goal that would win it. But Lona Seabrook made all his kicks. And then Stevie was loose in the end zone. But you go back and look at the video on the game-winning touchdown. D-back stumbles just a little bit. Stevie gets some room. And you go back and look. When just before Andre threw the ball, Derek Locke throws a vicious block at an LSU blitzer. And Derek Locke, as you know, wasn't a big guy.
Yeah.
If he doesn't throw that block, that pass isn't completed, and Kentucky maybe loses. So that was one of the biggest blocks ever thrown. And then, of course, Braxton Kelly makes the tackle at the end. Close second was earlier in the year when Stevie got loose against Louisville.
Yeah, can't argue either.
That was fun.
Yeah, you can't argue with either one of those for sure. Couple more real quick. I know you've called volleyball, and in addition to everything else that you've done. So they had a pretty nice week, here, sweeping Tennessee and then taking it to Arkansas. And to me, maybe I'm wrong, the fact they played this brutal non-conference schedule, but they were still ranked, I think showed that the pollsters had respect for what Kentucky has done and what they think Kentucky will do. And here we are in conference play, and they're right back in first place where they've been for over a half decade.
I think you're exactly right. I think that's respect from the pollsters for Kentucky, for the teams that they've played. And understand, this is a coaches poll. So these are the people who know the game the best. And they appreciate the fact that Craig kind of overscheduled, But to me, what was the most impressive thing is they stayed together. But that comes from that winning culture. That's a word I know that's overused a lot. But so many of the kids on that team are veterans who know nothing but success and championships in the Southeastern Conference. The younger kids, the new recruits, they have come on to be a part of that. So even if they're looking around like, what the hell's going on? The older kids are like, we're going to be fine.
Yeah.
And Craig told me that in practice they're still working hard, they're still competing hard. That's one of the things I really like and respect about Craig Skinner. If you play well in practice, you will play in a game. Conversely, if somebody goes past you in practice, you might not get off the bench. Even though you might not be playing poorly, she's playing better. And a great example is Aaron Lamb, who at times was carrying a great load for Kentucky as a regular player. Well, some of the other kids outplayed her. Craig Skinner puts her in the fifth set against Arkansas. She gets 3 of the game-winning kills.
Yeah.
Comes in cold and gets them. So they're a lot of fun to cover. I love covering volleyball. It's one of my favorite things. I've been doing it since the mid-'90s. Did it on radio a couple of years, believe it or not. But I so enjoy doing volleyball.
Because I tweeted out that, she was like Deron Lamb. She was unconscious. She was hot and, and just came in the moment, and it wasn't too big, and, made the plays that need to be made.
She's a powerful player, so you put somebody in like that who can swing like that, fresh, perfect.
Now, I'm not, you've been doing play-by-play. I'm not asking you to be critical of colleagues. I'm not sure who was calling the Arkansas-Kentucky game on TV that day. But to me, and look, I'm watching with a Kentucky bias, of course, hoping Kentucky wins, but they kept trying to convey it as if this is such a huge win for Kentucky. This is a monumental win for Kentucky. I'm like, no, it's not. I'm like, Arkansas would like to be where Kentucky is at. Kentucky's record isn't what you would think, but Kentucky just won a national championship. Kentucky's winning the SEC every year. It's not like Kentucky's still on their way to doing these things, but they kept making it like Kentucky's getting the momentum. They're pulling off this upset. Arkansas is Goliath, and I just didn't think they were painting the picture right. Maybe I'm wrong.
Arkansas was the only undefeated team in the league and had an overall glistening record, but of course, to your point, hadn't played the schedule. So to me, if I'm doing the national, I'm not gonna knock them. They've forgotten more volleyball than I'll ever know.
Yeah.
But to me, the storyline was here is the team that would be king or queen of the SEC coming into the den of this team that knows how to get it done.
Yes.
Now has become the SEC's worst nightmare. Suddenly Kentucky's starting to figure it out.
Yeah.
What happens next? And the other thing too, Vinny, is Florida has stumbled a couple times because they lost their setter, who's a phenomenal player, and Florida's really struggled because the league for so long, as you know, was the Florida Invitational. And generally it's you got to go through Kentucky and or Florida to get to the top. But I can't say that they didn't call it properly, but to go in thinking that Arkansas was Goliath and Kentucky was David isn't really accurate. But it turned around, I think, by the end of the fourth set.
Because Kentucky still is the hunted more so than Arkansas, even though,
you got to knock out the champ, right?
Yeah.
Knock out the champ to get the belt.
I don't usually quibble with, broadcast. I listen and but that I just kept thinking, I'm like, it's not really, Kentucky's not the one that's trying to climb the mountain here. But,
that was the question. If this were, and there probably was a Vegas line somewhere, but if this were on a Vegas board, who would have been favored? Arkansas or the hot Kentucky team playing at home?
Kentucky would have been, I would think.
And if not, it would have been like Arkansas by maybe 1.5 points.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So anyway.
Last one I got for you, Gabe. Kentucky baseball just made a nice run to the Super Regionals.
Yeah.
Are they in position, because we saw this early in Nick Mingione's tenure, are they in position to better handle that success now going forward than they were then? Can you see them and look how the landscape has changed? There was no portal and no NIL just 6 years ago, but they in position now to kind of build on it and sustain it and progress from it.
I will say yes for two reasons. Number one, when Nick got here, he had to re-recruit some of the kids who played here. They lost 4 or 5 recruits when they made the coaching change. When Gary left, Gary left on his own and then fell into that job at Mississippi State. And good for him. He did a great job. It's at Utah now. But when he left, they lost 4 or 5 recruits who ended up starting in other D1 schools, good schools. So, yeah, they inherited kids who were a little bit down on themselves. Mingione did a tremendous coaching job that first year, not so much with the physical, but the mental, convincing them that they were good. In fact, I did the radio on the first series of the season at North Carolina, and he scheduled the Tar Heels for a reason. They were ranked 10th in the country, had a top 10 draft pick right-hander that opened the season. And Nick knew that they might not win a game, and they didn't. But after the last game, the Carolina sweeps, they talked in the dugout for 45 minutes. And Nick said most of the time it was Nick saying, guys, we're good. You're good. You can do this. We can play. And the players told me, we did a documentary on that season, and the players said it was about halfway through the season until they really believed in themselves. And by then, they were rolling. And, man, they made a run at the SEC championship regular season and then went on to win the regional, as you know. But because the recruits had left, they were way behind in recruiting already. They were almost a year and a half behind because they hadn't started recruiting for next year because they had just gotten there. And then when they tried to plug the holes with some JUCOs, those kids didn't work out. So it's like they almost lost 2 years of recruiting. You know, that's not the case now. They've got talent coming back, and you're exactly right. They got the portal. I don't know if NIL comes into play, but they're so much farther ahead. I'm not saying they're going to win a regional this year, but I don't think they backslide like they did in 2018 because of the kids they have coming back, and they've really plucked some talent out of the portal. I can't name names yet, but I'm going to go over and watch them practice and start to learn these new faces, you know. And they lost some great veterans. And the chemistry on last year's team was just like the team in 2017. And just like the team in 06 that won the SEC. And I remember covering that team, and one of the players said to me, we're just a bunch of guys. And I thought, well, of course you are. I mean, you're a team. But then I was like, oh, I know what that means, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So good stuff. Good stuff. Who's on tap to be on Big Blue Insider for this evening? 6 to 8, right?
This evening, actually Cameron Mills.
Speaking of devil.
Yeah, I wanted his thoughts on the blue-white game, and I wanted his thoughts on what to expect with the Georgetown exhibition. My buddy Gary Graves is the Associated Press correspondent here in town. He covers football, basketball here at U of L, Louisville. Don't talk about that tonight. But and Gary, like me, is a huge Packers fan.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And my boy Billy Rutledge, who was my producer for 2-3 years, now has his own show on LAP. We pick NFL games, and I added them up. We've been doing them now all season. We're just a little over 500. It's hard. We pick against the spread. It's hard, man, but it's fun.
It absolutely is hard.
He's a big fantasy player. He's in like 5 leagues.
Oh, man. So just trying to keep your head above water with the picks. It is hard.
Yeah. We've also got an interview with Ray Davis. We have an interview with which one did I use? DJ Wagner tonight on the show. And I talk a little bit about this mess at Michigan. It's taken some really weird turns.
Yes, it has. Yes, it has. So great loaded show that everybody can listen to on WLAP.
Download it from your favorite podcast source.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Gabe, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Taking the time to hop on here. Enjoyed it. Definitely have to get you back on to see how far it is from the bumper to the Lafayette High School door.
Yep. I'll be dragging you on next week to get your thoughts on this weekend doubleheader, basketball, football.
Hey, just honored that you even want to have me on to hear my 2 cents. So I appreciate it.
Of course.
For everybody, this has been another episode of Believe in Kentucky. You can get it at Believe.com. We've been live streaming on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube. The podcast will be up on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. And we always appreciate A Sea of Blue. Jason Markham and the fellas put every episode up on their website with links where you can watch or listen. So for the legend, Dick Gabriel, my name is Vinny Hardy. Been another episode of Believe in Kentucky. Y'all take care. Go Cats, beat the Vols. We'll holler at y'all.